Hello, everyone. My name is Dawn, and today we are interviewing Katie Hammer. Hey, Katie.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. So, you have a book already out called Chasing Faye, but you also have another book coming out this year, which is Chasing War. Is that right?
Yes,
Awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about them?
absolutely. Chasing Faye was my debut novel, young adult fantasy, and the first in a planned trilogy. It follows the story of a young mortal woman named Grace. Her older brother goes to serve in the Fae's world as a mercenary, and she expects him to return with all of the honors and accolades that he deserves. But when he dies in a mysterious accident, nothing comes down from their realm. No medals, no funeral costs, and no body. So she suspects that there's a little bit of foul play going on. So she decides she's going to disguise herself as a fae and sneak into the upper realm to get some answers. And so the story really follows her journey. She gets caught pretty much day one by a fae soldier. He takes a liking to her. He's kind of been looking for some adventure in his life. And so she's forced to drag him along as she tries to figure out exactly how and why her brother died. It's a really epic adventure kind of story. And I had a really fun time writing it. Chasing War is going to be book two and should be out hopefully by the end of this year.
Awesome. Now that sounds like a really exciting story. I find so interesting is that I'm 29 years old, but I love reading young adult books. Even though I'm not technically a young adult anymore, but I find them so interesting. I think it's because of the way that they're written. They're written for kind of anyone who is young at heart, and I think that's probably what draws me towards them. So, what inspired you to write that book, those books?
This book was actually inspired by I had a really close friend of mine who was like a brother to me, who, in kind of a mix of typical high school drama, we ended up losing contact with each other. And I wanted to find a way to kind of keep the good memories that I had while also finding a way to kind of move on from that, that really close relationship and find a way to kind of cope with that. And so I started writing this story. It kind of came to me out of the blue. And as I was writing it, it became less about, finding a way to get things off my chest and suddenly started developing into a real adventure story, which is the kind of stories that I love. I love reading. I love YA fantasy. It's absolutely my favorite genre to read. And it was actually really my first attempt at writing in the genre, which I found I just absolutely fell in love with.
And that's what so many writers say. I mean, I've had a passion for writing since I was a little kid, but there are so many writers out there who they try it in an attempt to get closure or to work through something, and then they find that they absolutely love it, and just like you, it turns out and it turns into a full story, and it turns into a book. And I love that, how all of that unfolds. Now, when you were writing, did you outline the book first, or did you just jump in with the idea?
Absolutely. I'm very much an outliner. I need to have my outline, my reference documents. I got to have all of that open when I'm drafting in order to kind of keep things moving along. I like to have an outline, even a detailed outline to work from, but I'm really also open to within, looking at kind of the main plot points, kind of letting the story flow in places. I often add things to my outlines as they come up so that I can keep things moving, but also allow for a lot of creativity within that.
Oh, I totally understand that. I am an outliner to the extreme. Like, I probably outline too much, because I do my outline, I do all my research before I even start my draft. And I do that because once I start writing, I don't want to be interrupted. I don't want to have to stop writing if I'm really flowing, if I'm really inspired, in order to do research or think of what happens next. I want to know what happens next and be able to just continuously write through it. So that's why I think outlines are really important. Do you write every day, or do you only write when you're inspired? That's something that different writers do different things. I would love to say that I write every day, but it's not true. I I have been trying so hard to get myself into a habit of writing every day, but it's difficult. You have to work within your schedule and everything else that happens. So how do you write?
I try to write every day. I probably end up writing probably 4 to 5 out of 7 days of the week. I bounce around a lot between projects. I have several projects kind of underway right now, and I tend to follow where the inspiration leads. If I'm feeling one section more than the other, I'll jump over and then I'll jump back. My drafts for my particularly my novels are written out of order. I don't write beginning to end. I did that when I was younger, and then I realized as I was doing the NaNoWriMo in 2018 that I am actually a much better writer when I can move from scene to scene. Whatever scene I have inspiration for, it is much easier for me to kind of follow that path rather than trying to force myself to go beginning to end. Chasing Faye was written forwards and backwards and then met somewhere in the middle to finish the first draft. So yeah.
That is really interesting because you hear different things from different writers, and that's what inspired me to do this YouTube channel, because different writers have different ways of doing things, and I think that it's important for everyone to know that, because you don't have to follow just one writer's path. You have to create your own. I mean, some writers they have to write beginning to end. They can't write it out of order, but some people like you, they you write the scenes that you're inspired to write, and then you kind of pull everything together in the end. And I think that it's fascinating to me, I mean, as a writer, just to know how many different ways there are to do it. Now, with that being said, with the way that you write kind of everything out of order, how do you arrange your schedule to get all that writing done? Do you have a specific time every day that you write, or do you have a schedule of what scenes you're going to write? Like, how do you arrange all of that?
So I usually write in the evenings. I am actually just started this semester's classes this morning, and so I most of my daytime is dedicated to schoolwork and homework, and then my kind of 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. is my author time. That's when I tackle the majority of my writing. I've set aside that time so that I like to write when I'm kind of in the living room with people. I work really well kind of in kind of an open space rather than closed off kind of in my bedroom. I don't usually have a plan for which scenes I'm going to write. I usually have kind of larger deadlines, like I need to finish this first draft in 45 days. Let's tackle kind of I kind of like to start with letting the inspiration lead, and then kind of figuring out, kind of once I get to the back half of whatever my planned time is, that's when I start looking at, okay, we need to write this many scenes or this many words a day.
And I'm happy that you mentioned that you gave yourself deadlines. Like, you want to have this part of your book done in X amount of days. Like, I think that's so important for a writer, to give yourself deadlines, because if you don't have a deadline and you just have a goal, what's motivating you to work on it if you don't know when it's due? So that makes me really happy that you said that you'd make deadlines for yourself. But you also said that you write better when you are around other people, when you're in an open setting. And for me, I'm the opposite. I'm like, I can't have any distractions. If I have distractions, there's no way I'm getting any writing done. So but you'd like to be out in the midst of everybody. So where do you go in your mind to write when you're around everybody else? Like, what is that mindset like?
There's kind of two spaces that I like to be out, kind of in the living room or in my school lounge when I'm on campus working. Just, I like the openness of the space. I think when I'm in like one of like the library study rooms or in my room, I feel too closed off from everything. So I have one set where I'm alone in an open space, which happens usually kind of early evening while everyone's still at dinner, where I play music and I kind of get into this writer space. And when I'm with people, I'm kind of still, I kind of retreat into this headspace where I'm very deep in my imagination, like everything, I can almost tune out what's happening around me. because there's something creatively driving me towards my goal that kind of just, it definitely becomes a one-track mind kind of a thing. And it's impossible to carry on a conversation with me while I'm kind of in that brain. I'm like, I will answer you in somewhere between 5 and 45 minutes from now. I promise I'll answer your question, but I've got to get, this scene out or this line. And it kind of just flows that way, I guess.
Gotcha. No, that makes perfect sense. I mean, there's been a couple times where I have had to write in front of, like, in the midst of other people, where I just get inspired and I have to write. Like, it's just something that's compelling me. Like, I have to get this out, and I'll be at the dinner table with everybody around, and I will completely zone out, and people could be talking to me and I could have no idea that they're even there, because I am so encompassed with my inspiration and my ideas and my writing that I'm just in a completely different world at the time, even though I'm sitting at the dinner table. um, so what was, or were there any difficult parts of the writing process for you that you struggled through when writing your first novel?
I find the first draft to be the most difficult part of writing a book, because the first draft for me is trying to translate this beautiful picture in my head into essentially straight text. Like, and it definitely does. I think something that is really interesting to kind of communicate to readers is, it doesn't, like, books don't come out like these beautiful formed pieces to start with. My first drafts are very, I have some description in there to kind of lead people into the world, lead myself really into the world, but all of that detail and layer, and even stronger character development, all comes in the revision stage. The revision process is my favorite part of the writing process, because I can really see with each draft the how much it has changed and how many improvements have been made. And I just really like seeing that. I really like seeing kind of the progression of the story as it builds.
Yes, and I think that's really important for writers to know, especially beginner writers, is that your rough draft is that it's rough. It's supposed to be rough. It's your first draft, and it doesn't have to be perfect. I think so many writers get it stuck in their head that as soon as they write it down, it's permanent, and it's not. Your revision process is where a lot of your detail comes in. It's where a lot of your different writing elements come in, because when you write your first draft, you're not thinking about imagery and metaphors and all those different underlying elements that your book needs, and all of that comes within the revision process. Your first draft is kind of your foundation for everything else that comes next.
Absolutely.
And I love the way that you said that. It's when you're writing your book, you're trying to get this beautiful image that you have in your head onto paper, and it comes out so different because you have this image in your head, and you're trying to convert that image into words, and it doesn't always add up, and it's really difficult. It's like literally the most difficult thing, I think, for a writer is the process of getting that beautiful image into words, and it is a really difficult process. And I think that a lot of writers need to know that they're not alone in that. Even if you
Absolutely.
love writing, it's still difficult. It's always going to be difficult, but the more you do and the more you practice, the easier it becomes. And definitely knowing that that revision process is one of the most important parts of the writing process is essential, because if you stop at the rough draft and you say, oh, this is horrible and I'm a horrible writer, and you throw it away and you never touch it again, you are missing out on so much opportunity, and your story is not even close to being as developed as it can be when you just finished your rough draft. So I just want to use this interview to encourage writers: don't stop at your rough draft, keep going, go through the revision
Absolutely.
process.
I started writing from a very young age. I was 11 when I started kind of writing my first kind of novella slash novel length stories. And what Chasing Faye was really the first idea that gelled, that I was able to kind of keep up the same momentum from first word to last word of the first draft. Every other draft I attempted, there's like 7 to 8 unfinished stories lying around possibly this room, in drawers and in folders. Every every idea that I tried did not, I couldn't get past the first 7 or 8 chapters because I was self-editing way too much. I was trying to make that 7 to 8 perfect before I kept going, and I would always fizzle out. It wasn't until I started chasing Faye and tackled NaNoWriMo, where you really don't have time. If you want to hit your 50,000 word goal, you don't have time to stop and go back and fix. And that was when I realized, wow, if I power through on this first draft, I can make so many more improvements in the revision process that I was trying to do way too early. So pretty much to any aspiring writer, I would say the most important thing is to get your first draft from head to paper, write fast, don't look back, and then you can fix absolutely everything you want to fix. It will still be there when you are ready, when you come back to it. That first chapter that you hate will still be there to fix when you finish, chapter 30 or 35.
And that is I don't even know the words for it. You literally just read my mind, because it's so interesting that you said that. Like, I probably have 40 something books that I have started writing.
Wow.
That I have yet to finish because I am a self editor. I try to make everything perfect as I go. And it is my goal to change that mindset and to go back to those books and just write the first draft from beginning to end. And I think NaNoWriMo is a perfect thing to do. Even if you miss the deadline for it, for their monthly sessions, you can still sign up for it, and you can still track your writing as you go in your own personal projects on it. And I think that's one of the things that really helped me, because I have to put in every week how many words I've written. And if I haven't written any words that week, I get really discouraged. I'm like, oh my gosh, now I have to go back. I really have to write. And that discouragement can actually encourage you to write more. So I think that's amazing. That you mentioned it. And I wonder how many writers out there have the same problem, have the same amount of unfinished stories lying around that they haven't been able to finish because they can't get past a certain point without, like you said, fizzling out. Because when you're self-editing as you write, you burn out because you're doing way too much at a time, and you're kind of combining different parts of the writing process where you really need to take a step back and just do one step of the writing process at a time. With that being said, what are your goals as a writer? Do you plan on going back to those stories and finishing them, or do you have other plans for stories? What are your goals? What are you looking forward to?
I haven't thought about much kind of going back to those old stories and seeing what's there and seeing what I can work from. So that's, now that you said that, that might be something that I might scan. Other than that, I have several projects that I'm working on right now. I have Chasing War. I have a novella that's set in the Chasing Faye universe that I'm hoping will be out by the end of March, to kind of tie people over until December, because I know I'm one of those readers who cannot stand waiting, a year or more for the next story. So I want to make sure that, people who are reading my stuff are, happy with more content. I'm toying around with a nonfiction project. I'm looking into historical education. I'm a history major, and I love history, and I'm kind of trying out something new there. Other than that, I plan to primarily stick with young adult fantasy. I have more story ideas in me than I realized. It wasn't until I kind of put Chasing Faye out in the world. I thought Chasing Faye and the other 2 books in the trilogy was going to be my one and done kind of series, and that was going to be all that I had in me, until I pulled together some notes that I had made and put them all in a folder and realized I have 11 or 12 more books that I have ideas for. And then I was like, all right, I think I might make, being a full-time author definitely kind of like a second career for me. I really enjoy being an author. There's something very creatively fulfilling about creating a world and making it happen, and creating people who run around in that world that people enjoy reading. And I'm definitely hooked on that feeling. So I think I will definitely be continuing with that for as long as I can.
That is absolutely amazing. I think that that is an amazing goal. I think that realizing that you have so many more stories in you is one of the best feelings as a writer, to know that, you have so much that you want to write, and you have that feeling that you have to write in order to fulfill something in you. And I think that that's when you know that you're an author, when you feel like you have to finish the story, you have to get the story out, and then you realize how many other stories you have in you, to say. And I think that a lot of people in the beginning, if they have an idea, they think, oh, there's so many books already out there, that they don't, that, everything's already been written. And that's not the case at all, because even if you have one story idea, even if it's similar to a different story that's already out there, the way that you write it is going to make it different from everything else that's already on the market. And I think that's really important for people to understand, is that you have these ideas, you should develop these ideas. I think it was Stephen King who said, if you should do it, and if you start to do it, you'll get it done, or something like that. It was a really, really good quote. But it's and I love looking at, I love inspiring to be those kind of authors like Stephen King, where his name even if you've never even read his books. And I think it's an amazing goal. I mean, for me as a writer, I have so many ideas and so many outlines that I really just need to sit my butt in a chair and write my drafts. And once I do that, then go to the revision process. That's my current goal. Because
That's a
I
good
want to
goal to
make
have.
being a full-time author. Yes. Because I want to make being a full-time author my only career. And being able to do that is going to take writing those first drafts and getting from beginning to
Absolutely.
end without doing the editing and revising all at the same time. So that's amazing. Do you have anything else that you want to say to any aspiring writers out there?
I do. I think for all the aspiring writers out there who aren't sure if, if this story idea is the right idea, if you really want to go for it, you should absolutely go for it. I spent a lot of time in my youth wondering and, contemplating whether this was the right plan. And it kept me from going for it. It wasn't until I got to college that I realized, this is my time to really take all those opportunities and just try absolutely everything. And so, for all of you guys out there, start that story. You will not know how it's going to turn out until you put those first words on the page. Write often, write fast, revise for as long as you need to, and then consider putting it out in the world. There are a lot of people who want to read the stories that you have inside of you.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with all of that. Well, thank you so much for meeting with me, and being able to reach aspiring writers and other authors. And I can I'm actually going to go on and buy your book, so I'll be
Wonderful. Thank you.
following you, so that when the Chase and War comes out, I'll be able to get the second part of the story. So
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
thank you. You have a great day.
You too.
All right. Bye.
Bye.